I'm Gary Mokotov, and this is the lecture on Origin of Jews from North Africa by Dr. Alexander Beider. I've known Dr. Beider for many, many years. He's an amazing person. As he enters a new academic discipline, he becomes an immediate authority on the subject. He started out in onomastics with his books on Eastern European surnames, and then became fascinated with the origins of Yiddish and published, I think it was last year or the year before, The Origin of Yiddish Variants. About 2-3 years ago, when I met him, I said, "Sasha, when are you going to start working on Sephardic surnames?" And he said he had no plans to. I said, "Why?" He said, "Because he'd have to learn medieval Arabic." Well, guess what, folks? Dr. Beider has published his first book, and not on Sephardic surnames because he's a purist, but Jews from the Maghreb, Gibraltar, and Malta areas. And I said, "Well, why don't you call it a dictionary of Sephardic names?" He said, "Because that area included Ashkenazic names, Berber names, etc." So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Alexander Beider.
So 3 years ago, when I finished writing my book about the history of the Yiddish language, I was following the suggestion of Gary Mokotov to think about the popular book on Jewish surnames. And this popular book of Jewish surnames, it would be inappropriate to my mind to write just about Ashkenazic surnames. It would be much more appropriate to cover in some way another branch, which is Sephardic surnames. And when I started to think, maybe even to write about some popular elements concerning the names in, generally speaking, Jewish names, for Ashkenazic surnames I was able to, based on my own studies, and the excellent study by Lars Menk of names from Germany and from Prussia. And I thought to use some books that are published already about North Africa by my predecessors. There are 5 books that were already published all in French that deal specifically with North Africa, with different countries, or generally speaking with all of this area. And I started to read these books, and I realized quickly enough that information which is present concerning the etymology of names in these books is not really reliable. And so I realized that I cannot really back, even for a book about which purpose would be popular exposure of history of names, to be based on books for which I have a historical credit, but not a linguistic etymological. So at the same moment, even if a few years before, a French Genealogical Society asked me to write a review of the last book that was published at that moment by the French Jewish Genealogical Society that dealt exactly with the names of Jews in North Africa. At the beginning, I said I will not do it because I'm not knowledgeable in this domain. I knew almost nothing about Jewish history outside of the Ashkenazic world. But the person from the circle, genealogical circle of Paris, insisted, and I tried to see what I can do, and very quickly I realized that indeed I see the problems with the suggested etymology, and now if I prepare myself So if I study different books that are published already about the history of Jews in this area, or generally speaking, history of Jews in the non-Ashkenazic Jewish world, and if I look into the different studies concerning Judeo-Arabic dialects or just Arabic dialects, or the way Jews from Arabic-speaking countries were constructing their first name, I discovered all this literature which was not about last name, but it was about languages, dialects, first names, and all of them exist mainly in French. Some of them are in English. Fortunately for me, nothing is in Arabic. Well, I studied just the main feature of Arabic that I needed to, not to read in Arabic, but at least to write, to read Arabic letters, to consult a dictionary of Arabic dialects, etc. So I can easily find a word in Arabic dictionary, but I will not be able to speak in Arabic or understand someone speaking Arabic. But in any case, global feature of Arabic, I know them and I can check in the dictionary. And when 3 years later I have finished the work on the names of Jews in North Africa, actually the study of names for me, it's not, its purpose is not just to study names. It's not the final end. My main interest is, generally speaking, is the same for North Africa as for Eastern Europe with Yiddish. My main interest concerns history and history of migration. So from where people, Jewish people, came to this or that area, and last names, first names, Yiddish, like a language of Eastern European Jews, are just linguistic tools that allow to unravel the past of the Jewish people in different regions, and so these are just tools, linguistic tools to discuss the past. And for North Africa, I found very exciting the work on this topic because looking into the surnames of North African Jews, we can study much more about the history of these people than we can learn when studying names from Eastern Europe, for example. Why? Because in Eastern Europe, names were taken only at the beginning of the 19th century. So from names, we learn almost nothing about the past, so nothing about Middle Ages. But in North Africa, and generally speaking, in other countries of non-Ashkenazi countries, I mean medieval Spain, or Ottoman Empire, with names that came from medieval Spain, or names in southern France, names in Italy. These names are much older than Ashkenazic names, and so by studying these last names, we can see many clues from names concerning the past of the people and the area from where they came. The result is this book, a dictionary of Jewish surnames from Maghreb, Gibraltar, and Malta, that was published by Avutano, as all my previous dictionaries, with 10,000 names, and of which 2,000 are independent, and each name has an average of 5 variants. So I will speak not just about names, I will speak about the historical problem, and I will explain how, being based on names, we can illustrate some elements concerning the history of Jews from North Africa. Why I'm so interested in Jews in North Africa? First of all, I think because I live in France, and in France the North African community is the main one now, and globally speaking, after the Ashkenazic Jews, Jews from North Africa represent currently the second populous branch of Jewish people. were much more numerous than Jews from other areas like Italy or Ottoman Empire. Really, Jews from Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and to the less extent Libya. These Jews represent a very important part of Jewish people, numerically second after the Ashkenazic Jews. So first we will see we will be four sections. First of all, I will formulate what is the problem concerning, big problem concerning the origin of Jews in North Africa, and then I will address this problem from the point of view of history, from the point of view of what we know from history, from the point of view of what we know from surnames, and a very short section what we know from given names used by the same Jews and their vernacular language. The region concerned, you see it in the south, so the North Africa is Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya. These are the four countries of North Africa that together correspond to what is called Maghreb. For these countries, for Morocco, there is a total of about 720 independent surnames. Then I studied their origin, looking into the sources from medieval Spain. I was able to see that about 30% of these names existed already in Spain. And so this part is really Sephardic. And we know for sure, there is no doubt, at what moment these names appeared in Morocco. It was immediately after after expulsion from Spain in 1492. And you see here some examples of names from Morocco, and the forefathers clearly came from Spain, keeping their names, because people who were emigrating from Spain at that period, they had already fixed names. And so, example, you see Abensur, Albaranes, Almosnino, Amigo, Azuelos, Benzikri, Korkos, Gabay, Nahon, Sarfati, Uzel. So some of them, of these names, are from Hebrew. For example, Sarfati, that means that someone came from France to Spain, and then from Spain came to Morocco. And then, now in France, Sarfati is one of the most common Jewish names. So they made it circle. They returned from Morocco to France. Starting, so you see France, Spain, Morocco, France. Other names are Arabic, other names are Spanish, so there is a combination of different names, and we can be sure that these names came with migrants from Morocco, from Spain to Morocco. And these migrants were introduced, they were Spanish-speaking, and in northern Morocco, the Jews were still Spanish-speaking even in the 19th, 20th century. They had a Judeo-Spanish language which is called Haketia, especially with the cities of Tangier and Tetuan. In other cities from Morocco, like Fez, Rabat, Saleh, Agadir, Agadir is really in the south of the Morocco. There are documents from the 15th up to the 18th century that are written in Spanish, in Hebrew characters, but in Spanish. But after the 18th century, Spanish disappeared, and we switched to Arabic. So at the modern time, Spanish was kept only in the northern part, and it was enforced because in the 20th century, this part was also taken by Spain. So between 1911 and after the Second World, until the end of the Second World, until the 60s, this part with Tetuan, its capital, was part of, it was a Spanish colony. In Algeria, the number of names is smaller. in comparison to Morocco, the number of names from Spain is much smaller, only 6%. Example are Duran, Stora, Ancaua, Coen Solal, Cancinos, Asportas, Torza, Narbonne. Narbonne, again, Narbonne is a city in France. From France, they came to Spain. From Spain, they came to Algeria. One part of them, the most important part of them, came with the migration after the 1391, the first persecution of Jews in Iberian Peninsula. And all of them came from the eastern part of Spain that correspond to Catalonia, to Valencia area and Balearic Islands. So all of them from this area, some very famous for Algeria, they came after the persecution of 1391, and very few came after the expulsion of 1492. Why they came to Morocco but not to Algeria? Mainly actually some of them came to Algeria, but only in its western part, the Oran city. But immediately after that events, Oran was taken by Spain, and many other cities and towns along the Mediterranean coast were taken by Spain. So for this reason, Jews could not really, Jews who migrated from Spain, it was not a peaceful place for them to live there. In Oran, they lived for about 150 years. Even in Oran, that was occupied by Spain, and then in 1669, finally they were expelled from Oran. But this was an exception. So there are also much bigger, you see twice, from Italy, but it is not from the same period. It's much later. It was, and you see the name like Valles, Rodriguez, da Costa. These names are typical for former Catholics who came to Livorno, where they became open Jews, but they kept their Portuguese or their Spanish Catholic names, like Rodriguez, da Costa, Valles, and then they they started to be Jewish, openly Jewish, and some of them migrated to the city of Algiers, and they kept their Spanish or Portuguese names. And then different periods, some Jews came from Ottoman Empire. We see some names like Russo, Cicurel, Arditi. These are names from Ottoman Empire, and these people came from Ottoman Empire rather recently. Some of them were just teachers for Alliance Israélite Française, and they came to teach in Jewish school organized by French association, Alliance Israélite, from Bulgaria, from that was part of, maybe at that moment it was already independent, but in any case it's the area that was occupied by Turks for centuries. Tunisia. Many names from Livorno. And again, mainly these are the names from, some of these names correspond to Catholic names like Enriquez, Espinosa, Cardoso, Lombroso. Some are just Italian Jewish names like Modigliani, or Il Haik is a very curious example. This family was expelled from Oran at 1669. They came to Italy, and then one branch returned, but not to Oran, because Oran was occupied by Spain. They returned to North Africa, but this time in the city of Tunis. And so this way, there was a trip from North Africa to Italy, and from Italy to North Africa, return to North Africa, but not to the same area. Darmon is exactly the same example. Also from the Oran area, they came to Italy, and then from Italy, they came to Tunis. Some names from Ottoman Empire. In Libya, there is a much smaller number of names, and mainly from the 20th century they came from Italy, but Libya was part of Italy at the beginning of 19th century, 20th century, excuse me. And during that time, many people, Artom was chief rabbi who came from Italy. He became chief rabbi of Libya. But some names also are from Livorno, for example, Nunes Vais, this is a typical name from Ottoman Empire. And only one name, but maybe the most popular name in Libya, Labi, correspond to family who came. He was a rabbi who came from Spain to Morocco. When from Morocco, he decided to go to land of Israel. But in the middle of his trip, for some reason, he was, the rabbi Labi, was asked by local Jews to stay, and he stayed. This was a very important family for Libyan Jews, and at the beginning of the 20th century, this was one of the most common names in Libya. So here you see, I made a synthesis of what I said. People go into Morocco in around 1492 from eastern Spain before, and from Livorno to Libya, to Tunisia, and the city of Algiers. But I spoke only about names that migrated. Actually, there are numerous names that appear only in North Africa. And this is what, these names, I call them local. So you see in Morocco, 60% of names are local, not from other countries. In Algeria, the percentage is even higher. In Tunisia, just 1/2 are local, and 1/2 are mainly from Italy. But the percentage is totally misleading, because with 50% of names, they covered 90% of Jewish population. So the Jews from Libya Jews from Italy who were living in Tunisia, there were many families with just 1-2 bearers of the same name. But so globally speaking, the migrants from Italy covered about 10% of Tunisian population, but half of Tunisian Jewish names, because many names had just a few bearers. But 50% of Jewish names of Tunisia that are local, they covered about 90% of Tunisian Jewish population. They were much more, they were older, and they had much more larger number of bearers. And in Libya, again, 70%. So the question is, from where these people came? If we know for others that they came from Spain, from Italy, from Ottoman Empire, all these local Jews, they came from where? So different ideas, they arrived after Arabs from Middle East, or maybe before, or maybe they correspond not to Jews who came before or after Arabs, but just their local population, Berber population. Berbers are people who lived in North Africa before Arabs came to that area during the 7th and 8th century. 7th and 8th century. And so one of the ideas is that Jews, local Jews, correspond actually to Berbers converted to Judaism. We have nothing historical that would confirm any of this idea. And I will speak about the last idea because it is the most popular in the historical literature concerning North African Jews. So who are Berbers? Berbers, I said, it's a population that existed before Arabs came to this area, but even now there are areas in North Africa where Berbers live. And you see here in Morocco it covers about one half of the country. There are different group of Berbers living in Morocco. In Tunisia is the only country where no Berbers live except for the island of Jerba. But in Algeria, they are still important in Kabylia, and in Libya also there is an area of Nafusa mountain where Berbers live. But Morocco, really, one half on Muslims, even now, are Berber speakers. So, concerning Berbers, I gave here a quote from a study by the person who introduced the theory of Berber converted to Judaism. His name was Nahum Slush. He was a Russian Jew who was studying in Paris and who was living in France and wrote a number of books at that period. And he invented this, he is the author of this theory, and he say Judeo-Berbers, he invented this expression, Judeo-Berbers. It's an indigenous race. It covers, according to him, all Jews of Western Libya, which is Tripolitania, different parts of Tunisia, and many Jews from Morocco and Constantine, so eastern part of Algeria. But he was the person who introduced this idea, but many other authors, for example, Andrei Shuraki, in his History of Jews from North Africa, says Berbers converted in masses to Judaism and profound Berber roots for Jewish population in Maghreb. And I could continue, actually, many authors in modern France and Israel speak about this possibility, and as if it was a fact, actually. So this is the problem. Is this theory really reliable? Is it based on something that can correspond to historical reality? So what we know from history? In history, we know the medieval work, History of Berbers and Muslim Dynasties, by Arabic historian, famous Arabic medieval historian Ibn Khaldun in 14th century. And he writes, it is possible that in the past some of Berber tribes adhered to the Jewish religions, and he gives the name of 7 tribes that could be the representatives of these Berbers. So this is really the elements, the source from which the whole theory started. The whole theory started 6 centuries later, after Ibn Khaldun, of course, because Slush, he lived at the beginning of 20th century. And I added and read a passage from the same text, which is usually overlooked or ignored by people who proclaim this. They took Jewish religion, they adopted it from very powerful neighbors, the children of Israel in Syria. So about what period Ibn Khaldun is speaking? Usually the people who adhere to the Judeo-Berber theory, they say he is describing the events immediately before the Arab invasion. But immediately before an Arab invasion, there were no powerful neighbors, children of Israel, and especially it was not Syria. We are speaking about North Africa. So why Syria in this context? Other quotes from other parts of Ibn Khaldun text. His book, as usual for medieval studies, this book tries to trace the origin of Berbers to some biblical figures. And so he says that ancestor of Berbers was, and this is a quote of the Bible. And then he say, Berbers were expelled from Assyria by the King David after the death of Goliath. So actually he is not speaking about 7th century when Arabs came to North Africa. he is speaking about King David, so he is speaking about 10th century before Common Era. So, and Ibn Khaldun lived in 14th century. So he is speaking about events that took place 24 centuries before him. So can we really and about events that are described in the Bible, and the context which is purely kind of myth that describes the origin of people. So it's purely a symbolic passage, and it cannot have any historical value, of course. I still continue quoting from Ibn Khaldun. He said that before the invasion of Arabs, Berbers of North Africa professed the Christian religion. It's in another place, but this is quite explicit. He's not saying that they were Jewish before the Arabs came. And there is also a story of Al-Kahina that was a personage which is extremely important for Berber history. She was a female fighter. She was a female leader of struggle of Berbers against Arabs. And she is described in many stories about the Arabs coming, and she was the leader of the revolt and the struggle of local Berber population against Arabs. And so when Slush tells other people tells about this story, we say, look, Al-Kahina, you see the root Kohen. So she is the female priest. Of course, she is Jewish, etc., etc. But actually, no Arabic author says that she was Jewish by religion. And the previous leader, before she became the leader, it is explicitly said he was a Christian. And actually, what does Al-Kahina means? It's a normal Arabic word that which means fortune teller. And in the text by Ibn Khaldun, it's described that she was saying what will be the future, so it corresponds. So Al-Kahina, it was not her name, it was her nickname. And this is why it starts with the article, the Kahina, Al-Kahina. So it has nothing to do with Kohanim, of course. It's just an Arabic word for fortune teller. Now, why there is a coincidence between Jewish root Kohen and this? Because Arabic and Hebrew, they are related languages. And so it's the same root, but in Hebrew this root means priest, and in Arabic the same root gave rise to this word that means fortune teller. But nothing to do with Kohanim. So for history, we have nothing that could be reliable. And everything said by Slush about the testimony by Ibn Khaldun, about the Jewish leader of, Berber Jewish leader of the struggle against Arabs, it's not based on any any document that can be reliable. Surnames. So Slush said, in his book, another book, Introduction to the History of Jews in Africa, he said that he found 74 names in Libya and Tunisia, and he gave a list of 74. He gave the explicit list, and he said that these names are doubtless of doubtless Berber origin. And he said that almost the whole map of the old Jewish settlement in Nafusa mountain is a part of northwestern Libya. So he said that a large majority of his name come from names of villages in northwestern Libya. And this statement is repeated by many, many authors. For example, 3 other authors who wrote about Jewish surnames in North Africa, Eisenbeth, Laredo, Toledano, all of them gave hundreds of names explained of being of Berber origin. So I made my study of what is the number of surnames of Berber origin really. So when I finished my study of etymology of Jewish names, what are my conclusions? For Libya, 0 name. Not a single name comes from Berber. For Tunisia, 0 names. For Algeria, 5 or 6 names maybe. One of them very old, Zemmour, is really coming from Berber. It's known, it was a rabbi who appeared in the responsa in the 16th century. And in Morocco, there are about 20 surnames. Some of them are very common, like Azulay, for example, very famous name. Asulin, a very common name. Azenkot now is well known because of the Israeli minister who spells his former minister of military, who is spelling his name Eisenkot, as if it was Ashkenazic. But actually he's not Eisenkot, he's really Azenkot, etc., etc. And there is also a series of names. We starting with O of U, that means son of in Berber, and you see some example, and I found a very curious spelling of one of them. You see Ohana, and I have seen already a spelling like that, like as if it were an Irish name. But still, these names are really Berber, of Berber origin. Excuse me. So now, these names are of Berber origin. Do they corroborate the idea about Berber origin of Jews? Actually, if we look into the geography of names, you see that the only country in which we find really names of Berber origin, it's Morocco. But Morocco is, as I said, it's the country where even now 1/2 of population is Berber speaking. So there is no link to the past of many, many centuries before. And also, we have some studies of historians who visited Berber communities, Berber Muslim community, Berber and Jewish community in the same Berber-speaking area during the 19th century, and they say that Jews who were living there, they were speaking Berber language, of course, with Berbers, but among them they were speaking Arabic. So Jews came to these areas from Arabic-speaking areas, and they were not people who in the past were Berber-speaking and then switched to Arabic. No, it's the opposite. Jews were speaking Arabic, and then they came to Berber-speaking areas. They switched partly to Berber languages, and for this reason they took names. Some of them took names that are based on Arabic. But now, if I return to this list, what I did, you see in this list, he says that the names come usually from Libya and Tunisia. And I said you that in Libya and Tunisia, not a single name is coming from Berber. So on what his statement was based? Why he said that it corresponds to the map of places in western Libya? Before me, there was a researcher of Tunisian Jewish origin, Paul Sebag, who was the first person who tried to check whether this statement has any basis. And he looked into the most detailed gazetteers of Libya, and he found not a single place that would correspond to this claim. So Slush really, when he said that we have a map of Jewish settlement, he was inventing something. And I tried to understand from where he acquired his list of names he thought to be of Berber origin. And I found a book, the first book about Jewish history in North Africa. It was written in 1870 by Cazes. It's a history of, in French, in history of Jews from Tunisia. In this book, there is a chapter concerning names of Tunisian Jews, and he gives, the author says, from Spanish, and he gives a list. From Italian, he gives a list. From Arabic, he gives a list without explanation, but just he say, list the language. And then he says, I have a list of names for which I don't know what is their origin. And here he lists about 60 names, and actually these are the names Slush took. So he took the names from the list that was prepared of another author, with another author, Cazes said, these are the names for which I don't know what is their origin. And he said also, Cazes, that if I don't know, maybe they are of Berber origin, because Cazes, he knew Arabic, he knew French, he knew Hebrew, he knew Italian, I think, but he had no knowledge at all about Berbers, because there are no Berbers in Tunisia. And he said, but if I cannot explain them, maybe they came from Berber languages. But he was quite accurate. He said, maybe they are just distortions of some other names from other origin. I don't. At any case, he said, he called this list unclear origin. And Slush took the same list. The correlation is almost 90%, I think. And he said, these are the names of Berber origin. And actually, for many of them, the origin is totally explicit. For example, I told you about Lelouch. It's not Berber, it's Arabic. Mimun, it's a common first name which is gave Maimon in Hebrew. Maimon is another version of, it's an Arabic first name, meaning fortunate in Arabic. I don't know why Cazes called this name unclear. Citrouk is a name that came from southern France to Spain, first name, as Astruk, and he became Citrouk. Timzit is maybe really Berber, but from Morocco, etc. So in any case, Alush is really Arabic. Alush means lamb in Arabic. It's very strange. In any case, his statement of Slush was not absolutely not accurate, and he was clearly a kind of charlatan. So for surnames, as I said, we have names of Berber origin, but they correspond to Morocco only, and Morocco, Berbers still live now, and they cover about 1/2 of the population even now. What we know from given names. In any Jewish cultural group, we can look into the layer of given names. Given names are kind of source that allow to see all steps the community passed. So if we look into the given names in Maghreb, we find, of course, biblical names in their Arabic pronunciation. So Mushi is Moses, Natan, Sarah, Rivka, Istir is Esther, of course, in their Arabic version. So these names are taken from the Bible. So no surprise. No surprise. There are some Talmudic names: Abba, Akiba, Nisim. There are some Hebrew names like Rachamim, Sasson, Mazel Tov. Mazel Tov is a female name in Morocco. Everybody understands the meaning. And what I'm trying to show on this picture, for vertical x is time. So were taken only during the Talmudic period, when the Aramaic was the vernacular language. Okay. Now, after that, we still find names from Romance languages, so mainly from Spanish, that correspond to, they were brought by ancestors who came from Spain, like Blanca, Luna, Plata. Plata means silver in Spanish. Rica, which means rich. I told you about Citruk, Astruk from Vidal is vital, so it's equivalent of Chaim. So these names are also used. Some names are Greek. So you see, by looking to the names, we can see where ancestors lived, one part of ancestors. So one part of ancestors lived in Greek-speaking community, then one part of ancestors lived in Spanish-speaking community. A large part of names used by Jews in Arabic countries were based on Arabic. You see, for example, Musa is the Arabic version of Moses, and you have many, many female names. And usually they mean something very pleasant, so something beautiful, different flowers, different romantic meaning, exactly like Yiddish names, exactly like names of Jews from medieval France, or names of Jews from medieval Czech lands. This is a common denominator. And every Jewish community, female names that are not biblical mean flowers, so some romantic, have some romantic meaning. In any case, this layer was quite large, and this is normal because for centuries Jews in North Africa were Arabic speaking. And finally, I found just one name of Berber origin, Idir. It was used only in Morocco, and Idir means in Berber living. So it's a equivalent for Chaim again. And nothing suggests that these names was used for many centuries. Most probably it was created already during the last centuries in Morocco, in the areas where the Berber-speaking Muslims live. So if we look to that, you see that from given names, we have given names are a very strong tool that shows that if we dig into the past, usually if ancestors were Berbers, we would necessarily find numerous Berber first names. But here we don't find any of them. You see, we find all layers for different descendants, for different ancestors, but for Berbers, almost nothing. Almost just one name whose semantics is quite clear. It would show it can be a very recent translation of Chaim. And another last source, and I will finish with that, is Judeo-Arabic. So Judeo-Arabic was the language that was used in all of North Africa, except for the northern part of Morocco, where Jews were Spanish-speaking. But everywhere else, it was Judeo-Arabic, and even in Tunisia, when Jews from Livorno and from other Italian cities, they came, initially we were speaking Italian, but we abandoned Italian, and already in the 19th century, the Grana community, the community of Livornese Jews in Tunis, they were already Arabic speaking. How we know about Judeo-Arabic? There are excellent studies done by some linguists. So the first one was Marcel Cohen, who wrote about the language of Jews by Algeria. Then, many years later, another study was published about Tunisian Jews. What was the name of the author, according to you? What could be the name? again Cohen. Then, several decades later, there was an excellent study of Jewish names from, Jewish language, Arabic in Morocco, published by a Moroccan Jew, whose name was Levi. And now the final one was recently published about Tunisia, and the name is Japanese. He was a student, and he wrote an excellent book. I don't know for what reason he became interested, but all these books are excellent quality. And the most scientific, I would say, is the last one. Japanese who studied. So thanks to these sources, we know many things about Judeo-Arabic. And so what we learn? What are the lexical layers in Judeo-Arabic? So you see, I make the same approach as with given names. Let's dig into Judeo-Arabic to try to find any traces of Berbers. So we have Hebrew, of course. There are some Hebrew words in Judeo-Arabic like bracha, hacham, hazan, kashir. You understand what is kashir? Kosher. In Ashkenazic Hebrew. Rebbe, this is rabbi and shemash, though I think mainly these words are understandable for any Jew. Menorah. So in Arabic you have no O and no E. So this is why you always will have, in Standard Arabic, you will have just U, I, but not E or O. There are a few Spanish words. So potato, cauliflower, teacher, school. Some Italian words that were also brought from Italy by some migrants. For example, you see, excuse me, I forgot to change the French. The last word, piano, is floor. And of course, the language actually is Arabic with some additions. So all basic vocabulary, all morphology, all phonetics, syntaxes, everything is Arabic. But there are just a few traces from countries, from languages that ancestors spoke. Some were Italian, some were Spanish. Hebrew was always the cultural language, so these Hebrew words could be introduced into Judeo-Arabic at any century. What about Berbers? Nothing. Really nothing. Not a single word of Berber origin entered in Judeo-Arabic. So if we summarize, from the history, the only source about Berber origin we have, it is from the source of 14th century Arabic historian who was thought to describe events that took place 7th century before him, but actually, as I have shown you, he's speaking about biblical times. For last names, we have some examples, but they can be easily explained by recent borrowing or recent creation in the Berber-speaking areas. From first names, just one name that can be quite recent. From language, really nothing. So the theory has no basis. Now, what is the origin of Jews, local Jews? I don't know. And nobody knows. But what we can see, what we can observe is that if we compare again the language and especially the first names, we can see that these local Jews, they were part of the same cultural area that covered not only North Africa, but also Sicily, medieval Sicily, medieval other parts of southern Italy, medieval Spain. So all areas that were at some moment conquered by Arabs. So it was a large Mediterranean Arabic-speaking culture that was created during the time that all these areas were taken by Arabs. And so when all these areas were taken by Arabs, so I mean North Africa, Middle East, of course, Egypt and Sicily and Spain and Portugal, so all this area was a single cultural area in the Middle Ages when Arabs took all these places. And during this period, I mean between the 9th and until the expulsion, until the end of Reconquista, so until the end of 15th century, during 5th century, it was the one cultural area in which Jews were going back and forward between Spain, North Africa, Sicily, etc., etc. So it was during that time that the community was strengthened in North Africa. From Spain they were expelled, from Sicily they were expelled at the same moment as from Spain, because Sicily was part of the Aragon, so the same moment. And the only area where they survived was North Africa. And in North Africa, in names, last name, first names of North African Jews, we find traces of this important period of Jewish history of Mediterranean, when Jews were in all this area were Arabic speaking. Thank you for your attention. This is a common, so what is said, that Jews, that we don't need to search for a village, we need to search for a tribe, because Muslims who were living there, or even Jews, some part of Jews were nomads, and so we were traveling from place to place, and so this is why we have no fixed villages. But this is the idea which is promoted in Eisenbett, by other authors. But I addressed it in detail, and to my mind it has no basis, because every time we have a name of the tribe, indeed there are many names in North Africa that are exactly the same as names of some Muslim tribes. But for explaining this correspondence, we don't need to have a hypothesis that Jews took these names from the tribe, because actually both the tribe, a Jewish surname, they came from the same source. For example, there is a tribe, Ben Mimun, and there is a surname, Ben Mimun. But Mimun is a first name, Arabic first name, and for Jews, Ben Mimun means just son of someone. His Mimun or Maimon, which is exactly the same name. So this is the origin of Jewish name. But why there is a tribe, Muslim tribe, which is called Ben Mimun? It was founded by some Muslim who was a son of Mimun, because Mimun is also a first name used by Muslims as well. And there are also tribes that are derived from the name of some animals or from some basic words from Arabic. So, and Jewish names are also coming from the same source. So there is correlation, but both tribe name and Jewish names, they are coming from the same source, but Jewish names are not coming from the tribe's name. And I explored this by comparing the geography of tribes and geography of Jewish names. They do not, they are not correlated. So they have the same linguistic basis, but there is no direct link. If we start to discuss being based on last names, the past that correspond to pre-Arabic period, there is a big problem with such discussion because of the age of surname. Actually, if we look, many surnames, I said, they are quite old, especially in comparison to Ashkenazic names. But when I say quite old, it does not mean 7th or 8th century. The oldest names, we know just a few names from Morocco that started to be used in 12th century. So 5 centuries after the Arab invasion. And so surnames are old, but not as old to be possible sources for discussion the past before Arabic invasion. Before Arabic invasion, clearly there were some first names that could survive, but not surnames. Surname was not common at that period. And they started to become, some of them appeared 12th century, but they became common really in 15th, 16th century. So 1,000 years after the Arabic invasion. There are about 20 names starting with that prefix, Berber prefix, and some of them are purely Jewish. I have just to finish, maybe just a story concerning this man. Quite recently, I spoke with a Russian. I received a letter from one former Russian Jew who is living now in Israel. She said me that her neighbor, who is from Morocco, told her a very unusual story about his name. And he said that it's known in his family that their ancestors came from Russia, so from Eastern Europe at any case, and they were blonde, and for this, and they had a name meaning white man in German and in Yiddish. And so they came, and this name became common in Morocco. So she asked me, do we have any basis for this story? And I understood immediately about what name she's speaking. This name, Wisman, it is also written like that. It is also written like that. And I have also even have seen it written like that, like the first president of Israel, Weizmann. If we take Wisman or Weissmann, indeed in Yiddish and in German, Weissmann means white man. But these forms are quite recent. The real form is really Wisman, and so the first W correspond to Berber prefix meaning son of. And why this story cannot be true? Because this name is known from the 16th century already. I spoke 1 hour ago about many Ashkenazic Jews who are saying that their name is of Sephardic origin, but this was the story in the opposite direction. Someone whose origin is clearly Sephardic, not necessarily Sephardic, but from North Africa. We don't know where any ancestor lived in Spain for this man. But maybe yes, maybe no. But in any case, they also created this idea why people try, why Azenkot became Eisenkot in Israel. It's still the same. People, psychologically speaking, I think it is understandable. People try to find something that distinguish their family from families of all other people who are living in the same community. And for that, if the community is Ashkenazic, it's absolutely natural to search for yourself or your family something special. What can be something special? Rabbinical origin or Sephardic origin. Here is the same, but of course there are many stories about all families being rabbinical, and one story about one family being coming from in 20th century from Russia, but the family exists for 4 or 5 centuries already. They could not come from Russia. Thank you for your attention.